afternoon, everyone, and good morning to our West Coast attendees. Let's get started. We'd like to welcome you to the OJJDP Performance Management Team's Performance Measures Review session. We're glad you've joined us and hope you'll find the information helpful today as you consider your awards performance measures and the rapidly approaching upcoming reporting period. Next slide. So we'll be using the WebEx chat function today. So any information, our contact information, links to additional resources, you'll see posted in the chat feature as we go along. You should see our contact information in there now, actually. And we'll monitor the chat and do our best to respond to all of your questions at the end of the session. Any questions we don't get to, I don't see that happening. I think we'll have plenty of time today to get through all the questions. But if we don't happen to have time to get through your questions, we'll keep track of them and address them in either follow-up sessions or in written resources. So since we're going to be using a chat session today, we'd like to just quickly do a practice chat in a way that may help our team learn a little bit more about you, who we have with us today. So what's the answer to this question you see on the screen in the chat box on the right side of your screen? Let us know what state you're located in and what program you're working with. Or alternatively, if you're viewing this webinar with a group of folks, please post in the chat the number of you who are viewing together. Just make sure that in the to field, everyone is chosen, and then simply type your answer and hit either the arrow in the chat box or just hit enter. Get an idea of who we have. Excellent. State of Missouri. Responding. Great. Housekeeping announcements. I see North Carolina. Excellent. Thank you. Be recording the session today. Once we get to the question and answer section, we'll stop the recording. So up until then, the session will be recorded, and then we'll post the recording on the OJJDP website in the coming weeks. We'll also send attendees and anyone who registered an email containing a copy of the presentation after the session is over. And lastly, just keep in mind that although we welcome all grantees to our sessions, our focus today is on OJJDP performance measures for fiscal year 20 and forward awards. And we've also divided these sessions by OJJDP program divisions. So you'll see some information here specific to the State Relations and Assistance Division programs. You may see a couple of examples that programs that are not within the State Relations and Assistance Division, kind of just trying to be as specific for the State Relations and Assistance Division as possible, but also providing you with some examples of maybe how some other programs are depicted, whether it's in Q&D documents that we'll talk about. So again, welcome to anyone who may have just joined us. Thank you for joining us. We're happy you're here with us today as we discuss fiscal year 2020 and forward awards performance measures. I am Jill Ruggiero, one of the 2 training and technical assistance specialists with the OJJDP performance management team. I'm joined by several of my colleagues today, some of whom you may hear from, but I would especially like to introduce our task lead, Ann Schiff, the other training and technical assistance specialist, Aaron Feely, who you will hear from momentarily, and our help desk support specialist, Shanice Johnson. So the agenda today includes a brief reminder of why performance measures are important. Next slide, please. And an overview of fiscal year 2020 and forward performance measures. And then we'll go over a few important reporting reminders. We're hoping that by the end of the session, everyone will remember. We recognize this may be a refresher for some of you. So remember why performance measures are so important, which is ultimately because they help OJJDP accomplish its mission. Also because they influence evidence-based policy and, importantly, lead toward program sustainability. And we're also hoping that everyone will understand their program's assigned performance measures and the usefulness of the questions and definitions documents. We really can't stress that enough. We're going to spend quite a bit of time today going through examples of some of those questions and definitions documents because they're an excellent resource in collecting and reporting the data that we're seeking. And then lastly, to be able to easily find support and resources. Over to Erin Field to say hello and move right into the performance measures overview.
And thank you to those who have joined us today. So in this next section, as Jill mentioned, we're going to start talking about the definition and questions documents, which are specific to any FY20 and forward awards that you may have. Let's go to the next slide. Is an example of what those documents may look like. They do exist, as you can see, for non-participating states, Prison Rape Elimination Act. There is one for Title II as well. These are going to be all of the available performance measures that were assigned to a specific FY20 or forward, so FY20, 21, 22 award, but these will be assigned to. And as you can see on the screenshot here, there are 3 columns. I'm going to talk a little bit about those. So, but just to all know, copies of these documents were sent out to grant award administrators from the PMT Help Desk back in, December or January, as all of the awards were going active. So if the grant award administrators changed or you're not sure that you have the most up-to-date copy, please reach out to the PMT Help Desk, as Shanice has kindly put contact information in the chat there so we can make sure that we get that out to you. So these documents are going to be helpful for all of the awards, and they're also going to be helpful for those of you that have subrecipients, because many of these measures will be part of eventual subrecipient reporting. Some of these measures, as you're going through, they may feel like they're going to be a bit of a challenge to collect data on for you or for any subrecipients. So please, definitely reach out. Let us know. I'll talk a little bit about how you can do that in the future slides. As I said, those 3 columns you're looking at here, those are going to be the same for these awards as well as for Title II. So you're going to notice that the first column is going to have a question in it. The second column is going to have a relevant definition. Some of those definitions will feel broad, but that's on purpose. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. That third column there on the right is going to have the A and the B, and those will align potentially to what some grantees will see in grants. So just to note that in that first column, if you see something that says percentage, that is going to be something that our team, Jill and myself and our larger performance measure team will actually do the calculations on. The next slide. So as we talked about here, this is just a copy of a random definition and questions document, just to kind of give you a sense of how things may line up if you're going to see performance measures in the Just Grant system. Title II is going to be a little bit different. We're going to talk about that a little later on as well. The next slide. Point out also here in terms of the definition and questions documents that many of them do have very specific headers that may change how or what type of data you, your subrecipients, are collecting and reporting for that specific measure. So we do want to kind of, ask you to kind of look at those definition and questions documents. Again, those specific headers may apply to multiple solicitations or purpose areas. And if you're unsure how that's going to work for your particular award, please do feel free to reach out to us. We're definitely, available to do one-on-one phone calls to talk about your award specifically. So one tip that I do want to provide, and this will definitely apply to quite a few awards, including Title II for your subrecipients as they're looking at individuals who were served. On the question and definitions document, something you can share with subrecipients is to look for terms like new or carried over. Because those are going to be places where you're going to really want to watch how you're tracking and reporting, and for Title II, how are you monitoring the subrecipient data that's being offered? So, for example, carried over or carryover means that these are kind of like returning clients. These are individuals who may have been reported in the last reporting period, 6 months or a year, and then those who are new are those that are started services or entered a program in whatever the current reporting period is. The next slide. If you've been looking at the question and definitions documents, one of the things you may have noticed is that there are a couple of different categories, and this is something that does apply to the FY20 and forward performance measures specifically. And as you can note here, this is also questions come into the help desk quite a bit, so we wanted to offer some on that, particularly around the output measures. And just to note that these are product-based, and output is usually a countable product or service, something you or your subrecipients are actually providing. Maybe it's really attached to a deliverable. This is an outcome. These measures, they measure change, they look at change. They're looking at a difference in knowledge, attitudes, skills, or behaviors that are occurring within maybe a family or a system or a community. And those can kind of sometimes take longer to feel like they're being worked on. So I want to point out here that you are going to see such as overall measures and multi-program measures, and these are going to have definitions in that second column in the definition and questions document that we talked about. And I wanted to pull those out because some of those definitions are going to feel very broad, and they're that way on purpose, because these are examples of performance measures that are assigned to grantees that report on a lot of different solicitations. So for example, Title II, you're going to have this potentially for your subrecipients. The same performance measures may also be assigned to the non-participating states, as well as Prison Rape and Elimination Act grantees. So these are very different programs. So it's really going to be up to you to kind of sit down and say, okay, well, what does this mean for my program? How are we defining How are we defining when an individual exits service? And these are things that you're going to want to focus on so that you can kind of start to create an audit trail. So if you're sitting down and talking with your grant manager, or knock on wood, if there is an audit, that you can kind of say, we reported X of individuals served, and this is, and from our data collection system, or from the data that we're gathering from our subrecipients, this is kind of how we got to that number. I would be able to show someone how that works for within your award and your program. Slide. Take a minute to talk about training and technical assistance, because this is sometimes comes into the help desk quite a bit, because it may feel like there are duplicative measures on some of these definition and questions documents. and they're not. Actually, they can be a little bit different because we do want to know about training and technical assistance that is provided at the grantee level, as well as the subrecipient level, and also these same measures are also provided to the training and technical assistance providers. This will definitely show up in those headers that I talked about. You'll also be able to see them within Just Grants. So we do want to know, for example, if you as a grantee are providing training to your staff or to volunteers, that is going to be something that you can report on in Just Grants. So you want to note that if you do have a question that says population trained, then that is going to be something that is going to be a free text field, where many of the questions that are being answered, whether it's via an Excel document or directly into Just Grants or asking for a number, sometimes there is going to be some text-based answers, and that's just an example of a text-based performance measure that you'll answer. So what I'd like to do here, acknowledge that, for many of the OJJDP grantees, you may have had prior awards between fiscal years 2017 to 2019. You reported in the PMT. Those were very different measures. But in that reporting process, you may have received what was called a verification email or an outreach from the PMT help desk asking questions about your performance measures. So that process is going to continue with the FY 2020 and forward performance measures as well. So what I wanted to do is take a moment to kind of go over how this happens. For grantees, this can happen for subrecipients as well. So I wanted to share this because the validations, which is basically a way to check or monitor your data, that you can do. This is something hopefully also as Title II formula grantees you'll be doing for your subrecipients, because understanding your data and where things are coming from is very important and something that you can do before you log into a reporting system. Next slide. Management. Performance management is kind of the overarching way that you're going to look at working with subrecipients and working with the performance measures. It's going to involve first and foremost data collection, which is going to happen at the grantee level, at the subrecipient level. It's going to involve checking and monitoring data. It's going to involve reporting your data as well. So once your data is collected from your systems, from any subrecipient systems, you're going to compile those totals of the different performance measures. And again, as we talked about, you're going to make sure that within your performance management plan, hopefully, got some definitions or someone understands what, terms like service or served, exited means for that particular award data. For discretionary grantees, it's going to be on a 6-month period. For Title II, it's going to be for a 12-month period. Then once your report is into Just Grants, your grant manager is going to review that. They're going to see if they have any questions. They're going to reach out to you. That's going to happen eventually once those reports are completed. My team's going to step in, and we're going to validate or kind of check the data that's been entered to Just Grants. So it happens with PMT. So if we can go on to the next slide, we're going to go a little bit deeper into what we mean by validation. The validation that I want to talk about is kind of the one that's used for many, many different awards. One that hopefully is the easiest to talk about, and that is individual served. This is considered one of those we talked about before, that overall performance measure. It's assigned to many different awards. It is considered a key performance measure. It's one of the ones that our team really looks at first. So what we want to do is take all the individuals served for an activity period. And now for Title II, understanding that may be 6 months, that may be 12 months, depending how you're doing your reporting and data collection from your subrecipients. This is something they can do as well. Pull up all of the individuals served, and then kind of take that number, and they're going to use it to as a reference point, a validation to other performance measures that are going to be reported in JustGrants or in an Excel document. So what do I mean by that? Let's go on to the next slide and we'll go a little bit further into this. So the first step really is going to be to count up the totals for each of these data points. So, for example, children ages 0 to 10, again, who were new, ages 0 to 10 who were carried over a previous reporting period or activity period. So then keep in mind those individual totals, but really what you want most often is to keep in mind the total of all individuals served, youth, adults, new, carried over, everybody who falls under how your program or your subrecipient's program is defining served or services. So then what you're going to want to do is maybe that total and keep in the back of your head, maybe write it on a sticky note and put it on your monitor as you're doing the rest of the performance measures. And then you're going to kind of use that as a benchmark. And we're going to talk a little bit about that with some further examples in our next slide. So, the that we're talking about, for some programs or non-participating states, I just want to point out that the validation will show up for you in JustGrants. Understanding the Title II has got an Excel sheet, it's going to look a little different. Just want to take a moment to highlight what things can look like in JustGrants. And as you can see there with that 25B, that's going to be the point of validation that we're going to just talked about. We're going to talk about a little further, in that taking that total of all individuals served and making sure that checking your other performance measures and that they are coming up as less than or equal to total individuals served, which in this case is 25A. So JustGrants, our team, those checks are going to come up, so this is a good chance to kind of start to get used to them. An example, because this one does come up to the help desk quite a bit. This is also one that many different programs are going to see, which is protective factors. This is a prime example of where you want to take that key performance measure, the individuals served, take the total of all the individuals served, make sure that you are using that as a check and balance when you're looking at the protective factors, for example. What we want to do here is that we want to make sure that you are counting up the individuals who are, for example, receiving services. And then you want to enter that into option A, which is here on the right side of the screen, and making sure that the number that you enter into for A is going to be less than or equal to the total of individuals served. So we really want to note that you cannot have more people who have received services to improve self-esteem, more people who have improved self-esteem than were actually served during that booking period. Good. While we're here, let's just take a moment to talk a little bit more about protective factors. I mentioned this is a really great place to practice and to do those validations and checks. But the protective factors themselves are unique to the FY20 and forward performance measures, and these are really outcome-based performance measures. They're designed to help grantees and OJJDP understand the impact on the eligible individuals served by a program. So protective factor is measuring positive change in behavior. Understanding that these measures sometimes grantees may feel are a little challenging to track and report on, we do want to know about that, provide that feedback in the performance report. But this is also a way to kind of take stock and maybe try to energize yourself and your program manager to look at, if possible, is there a plan to be able to collect and track and report this data in the future. It's an opportunity also to kind of notice any challenges that may be coming up within the program design, and maybe consider talking to your program manager about some changes. The goal here is that these subrecipients can find that one protective factor on it from reporting period to reporting period, ensuring that the one or multiple that's chosen align to the program goals and objectives. And if you do need to report, or your subrecipient needs to report any zeros on protective factors which may not align to the program goals and objectives, I think we'll note a little further in the next section. There's going to be where you can note that in the narratives, in the narrative questions, or at the end of the question set, depending on what you see in Just Grants. Just Grants and reporting tips, I would like to pass it back over to Jill.
I will just pause really quickly to acknowledge, before we jump into these really important reporting tips, I'll just acknowledge that we just provided a lot of information. A lot of it is more broad to the overall performance measures, like Erin mentioned, and then we try to drill down to get as specific as we possibly can for programs. So we did give you a whole bunch of information. We want to remind you that we are here to support. There are a tremendous amount of resources on the OJJDP website. Through us, you can contact our help desk. You can schedule a support session through our help desk with either Erin or myself. The questions and definitions documents that Erin just highlighted are really, really useful resources that we always suggest that you start with. But the point is, we're providing a lot of review type overview information, and we know it's a lot and sometimes can be a lot to digest. But again, this presentation will be sent to all attendees and registrants. So we're here, don't fret. And I know for our Title II folks, you have more time. Your reports aren't due for longer than some of our other programs who may be joining us. So again, we're here, we're not going anywhere. But I'll switch gears just a little bit and go over a few of the reporting tips that we think are useful and often get frequently asked questions on. So if you can go to the next slide, I'll talk just a little bit about the OJJDP Just Grants report tips. So first and foremost, we recognize for our Title II folks, this is not what you will see in Just Grants. For our other programs, though, in the State Relations and Assistance Division, you should see 2 lines when you go into Just Grants to complete your performance report. The first, in Title II, there's exceptions, and we'll talk about that momentarily, so I'm not forgetting that, but we'll get to that. But in terms of the other programs, the first line you should see will be, it will look just like this screenshot, OJJDP PNQ. That is the progress narrative questions that Erin just talked a little bit about, and provides you all the opportunity to describe your program successes, maybe challenges, amongst other details that you find important in narrative form. And then the second line will be the quantitative data, the actual performance measures that we talk about so much, and that you'll find on the questions and definitions documents. So you should all see both of those line items in your July 22 reporting period, except again for Title II, who reports later, and we'll talk about your subrecipient reporting Excel sheet momentarily. We do encourage you, though, to use that narrative opportunity to really describe anything you feel is important for your grant manager or our performance management team to get an idea of what is happening in your program that may not necessarily be able to be described in quantitative form, if you will. Thank you. Well, a couple of other things about Just Grants. The narrative and performance measure data, so the quantitative and the qualitative, contain different types of questions that Just Grants will ask you for. So some will be number fields, some will be check boxes. This screenshot that we're looking at shows you just an example from a narrative report. Performance measure questions, though, that are seeking a number, you should always enter a whole number only. No decimals and no negative numbers. And some data points on the questions and definitions document, you'll see at some point, some of the data points may ask for a percentage. On those question and definitions documents, that's really for informational purposes. It's not for our grantees to calculate a percentage. Your data points that you're entering in whole numbers in those data points will be calculated by our team. So when you see percentage, don't fret. That's going to be something, as Erin said, that our team will take care of. Some of the performance measures questions also may require answers and generate an error message if skipped. So make sure you read the text in red. If you get an error message, it'll pop up in red. Sometimes we get calls to the help desk for folks being stuck at that point, thinking it's a system issue or a system error. It's not. It's not going to be something the help desk can help you with. It's going to be simply because you may have skipped a question that's required, that you need to enter something in. You may have a 0 to enter, and that's okay. Zeros are okay. If you have not provided that service, or if you have no individuals served to report, you can enter a 0. But in those required fields, again, you have to enter something. And if you enter zeros in any data points that you feel you would like to explain further, and of course we encourage you to do that, that's the narrative report, the PNQ report, is your opportunity to do that. So again, as Erin mentioned, there are going to be some data points that won't necessarily align to your program. Feel free and please do explain that in the narrative report. So for fiscal year 20 and forward subrecipient reporting tips, as I mentioned a bit ago, there are a few programs, but in this division, the only program that is affected by this kind of reporting workaround, are Title II grants. That you will all, as I'm sure you're familiar with, report subrecipient data via an Excel spreadsheet that will be submitted as an attachment to your report. Again, for anyone who is in attendance right now who are not Title II grantees and are either PREA or emergency planning or non-participating states, this does not apply to you. The subrecipient data sheet, Excel sheet, will only apply to Title II programs. Everyone else should aggregate their data and report into Just Grants as usual. Excel sheet that we talk about for Title II does not include all of the performance measures. Again, this is an anticipated temporary data reporting plan, so therefore we could only choose a few key performance measures. For example, measures that track extremely useful data points for the president's budget, so you will not see the full extent of your performance measures in this Excel spreadsheet. For the moment, until the functionality in subrecipient reporting is designed and developed, this is the kind of temporary reporting plan. So it may sound confusing. If it is at all confusing, please don't fret. We're here to answer any questions. It's pretty straightforward. It's not as confusing as it might sound. So we're here to provide any guidance necessary. And we'd just like to go over a couple of key highlights and, talk about the fact that we recognize we presented a lot of information. Some of you will be reporting soon. Others have a bit of time. Again, Title II, you have a bit of time. But I want to just highlight some key takeaways. So first, most importantly, we're here. Our help desk is here. You can reach us, set up support sessions with us. OJJDP website has a tremendous amount of resources. So that's most important. But then, we want to talk about the fact that performance reports are so beneficial for OJJDP to meet federal legislation guidelines and data requests, and also really to get us to program sustainability. So performance reports and performance measurement is really, really critical. Understanding your program's assigned performance measures and helping to do that from the questions and definitions document are a really useful resource. And also remembering that not every performance measure you see will align precisely to your program. We understand that, and that's partly why Erin went over some of those overall measures and then multi-program measures and program specific. So again, we try to drill down and get as specific as we can. Most questions will ask for a number, but some are yes or no or text fields. Again, go back to your questions and definitions documents for guidance. And subrecipient reporting in the Excel document for Title II will reflect just a few of the key performance measures. So when you see that attachment, that Excel sheet, and you don't see 50 performance measures, that is what you're supposed to see. You're only supposed to see a few of them as Title II. To open it up to questions now, we have plenty of time. We have the chat function is open, so please post any questions you may have in the chat now, and we can address them. Wait for questions to come in the chat. I will also mention that there is a resources section in the presentation. Goes over a little bit more about the importance of a performance management plan. Really useful information in there. So not only is there links in that resources section, we can flip through it briefly, but there's also some useful information on the importance of a performance management plan, why a plan is so important, how it helps grantees. So please do make sure that you go through the resources section of the presentation once you receive it. For questions, we'll ask. As you type your questions to us, we'll also ask you to share in the chat function if there's anything that you would like seen changed about the training or any trainings that would be useful to you in the future. We're open to any and all feedback and would love to hear it.